Today we're going to focus on Elias Levi's Baphomet. I have picked this subject as I find it one which has much to teach humankind about our own nature. However, it is a subject which requires of you to have the strength to listen to this audio through to the end. Baphomet is certainly a controversial figure. Who he was, or rather what he was to represent, is a subject of much controversy. However, the esoteric and alchemical meaning of Baphomet are much more complex. However, the alchemical and esoteric meaning of Baphomet is much more ancient and far more complex than Elias Levi's conclusion. But today we will focus on Elias Levi's Sabbatic goat. I find that his interpretation complements Carl Jung's alchemical teachings quite well as being a good source of illumination towards our own nature. I have no desire to convince you one way or the other. This is simply a look at history and you do with it whatever you want. That's your choice and free will. So, let's get started. Most people, when they look at the image of Baphomet, associate it automatically with the devil. It has a goat head, a 5-pointed star, and a flame at the very top. It is androgynous, sitting in a position for meditation, and between his legs holds a caduceus. His arms, one is pointed to the sky, while the other one is pointed at the earth. If you look on his back, he has wings. Elias Levi created this image for his book The Doctrine of Transcendental Magic in the 19th century. Born Alphonse Louis Constant on the 8th February 1810, he was a French sage, poet, and author of more than 20 books about magic, Kabbalah, alchemical studies, and occultism. Elias Levi was considered the greatest occultist of the 19th century. Levi acquired the profile of an original thinker and writer whose works attracted the attention of the very heterogeneous ambiences of the era, from Paris to London, from esoterists to artists of romantic or symbolist inspiration. He also expressed his independence by leaving the Masonic Lodge of the Great Orient, believing that it was a form of modern secularization where knowledge of the original meanings of symbols and rituals had been lost. He became outspoken against any type of secularization and indoctrination. Elias Levi followed an ecclesiastical career until he found himself in a particular great struggle where he saw and felt the cognitive dissonance being taught to others. He saw religious leaders as people who were more concerned with indoctrination and the hiding of the old teachings versus the illumination and liberation of humanity. At the age of 26, he quit the priestly path, yet remained close enough as to be able to study and examine for himself texts and manuscripts which were kept away from the public. The more he studied the origins, the more he found himself in the world of the occult. Elias Levi wasn't the original creator of the image of Baphomet. He came to know of him during the studies of the origins. Baphomet has similarities with gods from all over the world, including Europe, India, Sumerian. Many of those similar statues were found with horns. This doesn't mean the statues were used to represent the devil or anything demonic. We would be better off looking for the origin behind the symbolism instead of letting ourselves be guided by beliefs which were imposed later on. According to ancient esoteric teachings as well as Carl Jung's conclusions, horns were used as an archetype of God. The concept of a deity having horns is equally present in Celtic gods, Greek gods, Egyptian gods, and many others. In ancient times, the concept of horns was not to represent anything evil or negative. It was to represent virility. Within the Celtic culture, there was a deity named Cernunnos, which was the god of fertility and nature. Cernunnos inspired a part of the figure created by Elias Levi. Cernunnos is a representation of nature and fertility. It was to be seen by modern religious thinkers as bad due to its association to sexuality. Anything of sexual origin was and still is condemned. In Britain, Cernunnos was known as Herne the Hunter, god of the wild hunt. Herne had a more human face, but with the characteristics of a satyr. From the waist down, he had a skin covered on animal hair. Between the horns, Herne had a solar disk which is reminiscent of Egypt, like Hathor who had cow horns. We cannot interpret ancient symbolism from our limited modern knowledge nor our doctrinal beliefs. Like anthropology, to decipher something, we need to look at its origins and pay close attention to the psychology people had at the time, what it represented to them on their terms, and why. To them, horns had everything to do with the sun and the moon, which was the unity of the supreme god. It never had a demonic or depraved connotation. The skin fur on the symbol was to represent the earth, nature. Some statues of Herne show him holding a penis between his legs. In no way was this to be a depravity, simply and eloquently represented virility, fertility. It was all people's own misinterpretation that led to the confusion. Alchemy very well teaches that symbols are to represent energy. The more powerful the energy, the more they were given sacred symbols. Interestingly enough, anything that represents powerful energy has been tainted by the church as bad or evil, leaving only symbols such as certain crosses for humankind to relate. The cross, by the way, is a symbol of lesser alchemical energy. Symbols represent energy. It is the alchemist or conduit who gives it meaning of good or bad. What you hold within is what you will give. It isn't the symbol that makes anyone do anything good or bad. It's the essence found within that decides the path by which the energy will find its way. Again, it comes down to self-responsibility versus blaming the external for our own nature. The problem with the misrepresentation of the erect phallus came to us much later, when sexuality was seen as depraved and a tool used to tempt people to do evil things. Yet, all patriarchal dogmas have been responsible for the abuse and perversion of sexuality and what it means to be sexual. Ultimately, a person only gives and does as his or her own internal growth are capable of at that moment in time. Some people often point out to these so-called satanic symbols and how these symbols can be found all within esoteric knowledge. These same people would be surprised to find out that symbols of the Virgin, angels, and crosses can be found within the practice of black magic as an aid. So what does this mean? It means and solidifies once more that it is not the symbol which is bad, but the essence of the person and the direction such a person chooses to move that energy to. You can have a bad person wear a good symbol, yet this will do nothing to prevent that person from expressing his or her own dark nature. The same is true for its opposite. I won't deny witchcraft is based on powerful symbology, but symbology can also be found within many religions and philosophies, actually within all religions and philosophies. Powerful energy needs to be carefully moved. Alchemy teaches the initiate to understand and respect this truth. That is why Carl Jung tried to teach us to work on ourselves, to look at ourselves, otherwise the shadow remains in control. Let me be clear, what you hide controls you. Alchemy is clear that in order to move powerful energy, one has to have done the internal work. Otherwise, the consequences to our own psyche can be damaging. It isn't the energy or the symbol that is damaging, it's the conduit, for we are the philosopher's stone. The use of symbols later on became rituals for for our mind understands symbolism much better than anything else. These rituals of fertility, which were held annually, were to represent not just one aspect or one side of God, but both, feminine and masculine, God and goddess. If we take a look at Pan from Greek mythology, one would recognize we're talking about the same thing, the same figure, the same god of nature and fertility. People, however, don't see it as evil due to his human face. This is why it comes down not so much to the symbol per se, but to our own preconceived ideas of what this represents, forgetting the actual meaning behind it. Let me sidetrack for a second. The gargoyle figures, another representation of Baphomet on the Cathedral or Notre Dame of Paris, were built by the Knight Templars. Why did they choose such symbology? Because they were more educated sociologically and culturally about symbolism and about what it represented, good or bad. They knew these figures had no relation to anything diabolical or infernal. It was for political and religious reasons such a symbology later on became distorted. It is clear that symbolism can make many people uncomfortable, but it is only in understanding the origins where we can get closer to the truth, not by the inspection of watered-down, mistranslated, or misrepresented texts. Worse yet, by limiting ourselves to only one branch of study. It is by daring to expand ourselves and release the programming so we may learn what it was that these symbols meant and how we can use them now for the benefit of our own lives. The first writings or beliefs on Baphomet came to light in the 11th century, when the Templars were accused of being heretics and were also subjected to torture. Those who tortured them claimed the Templars had admitted to demonic practices. But to be fair, most people are capable of admitting to just about anything when confessing under torture. Among one of the things they were being accused of was the adoration and worshipping of a being named Baphomet. In reality, they were not talking about the whole statue of Baphomet, but rather of a head with a long beard. They were accused of having turned to the dark beliefs of the Saracens, with whom the Templars spent much time with. In the act against the Templars, no further explanations were given other than the fact that they found the Templars using the term Baphomet frequently. There is much debate regarding the head the Templars venerated, not worshipped, saying that it had been the head of John the Baptist. To some Templars, John the Baptist was considered the original Messiah and real mentor to people. It is also of interest to mention that in the castle of Tomar, located in Portugal, was found a large coin with an image of a head with a full beard looking in 3 directions, which is supposed to represent Baphomet. Later on, this image was associated with Zeus. Now we can get stuck debating on who exactly is it that they wanted to represent. But the bottom line is, the head was to represent a powerful being or persona, nothing evil or demonic. Baphomet was simply meant to represent the other side that Carl Jung so much talked about. It was to represent the shadow, the occult, what is hidden. That's it. Elias Levi was a Kabbalistic person whose study of the Kabbalah was profound, especially in the esoteric arts. Elias argued that the name of Baphomet had been derived from a Kabbalistic encoding and explained it as such. The name the Templars use, and that must be written Kabbalistically backwards, is made up of 3 abbreviations, Temp, Op, Ab, which means in Latin, Templi Omnium Hominus Pax Habas. Properly translated, it says, the Father of the Temple of Peace for all men. As you can see then, it had no malicious or satanic meaning. Archon Darul, who was the author and teacher of Sufi traditions, which is the most mystic and spiritual branch of Islamic beliefs, argued that Baphomet came from the Arabic word which means knowledge. In 1589, Peter Beansfield started a crusade for the demonization of the image of Baphomet. It is also then that he published without explanation of proper study or research, but guided by a political and personal agenda, a list of demons and their associated sins, which later on became associated with the 7 deadly sins, which were Lucifer, pride, mammon, greed, Asmodeus, lust, Leviathan, envy, Beelzebub, gluttony, Satan, wrath, and Belphegor, sloth. That man never explained the roots and instead simply caused confusion in order to promote his agenda. The worst part is too many people took his book literally. In reality, Asmodeus was the guardian of hidden treasure, nothing to do with lust. Belphegor was the guardian of Paris, of the hidden knowledge of Paris. Mammon, the Egyptian god of the night or the other side of the sun, that which is hidden, nothing to do with greed. If you notice, within every one of the ones repeated, there is a commonality, that which is hidden, and there seems to lie the key. Fear to all that is hidden, for we have been programmed to believe that everything that is hidden has to be bad. And that is also the reason why we don't like to look at our own shadow or to look in, for in there lies the so-called evil which will control us. Lucifer was the light, nothing to do with pride. Lucifer brings the light from the hidden depths. It was later on that Lucifer somehow gets associated with Satan. Later on, Satan would be confused with a demon and father of all demons. So there became a great confusion between Lucifer, the devil, Satan, demons. It became all a huge mess. Yet in ancient texts that precede the Bible and from which its knowledge derives, as something accepted and recognized even by Bible scholars, the devil is the other side, the adversary meant to promote chaos. And as I have said in the past, chaos precedes creation, is the other side, which means only you can decide which way you go, up or down. Unfortunately, if one confuses things enough, mixing good knowledge with bad knowledge, and puts it all in the same bowl, then people no longer recognize what is one thing from the origins. And that's exactly what happened to Elias Levi's Baphomet or Sabbatic goat. It became misunderstood. Let's examine what really Elias Levi tried to represent with his image of the Sabbatic goat. The symbols found on this image are neutral in themselves, and only minds guided by their own beliefs can give it a good or bad connotation. It is an image full of occult symbolism. The result is not very pretty, but that is because Levi makes various occult symbols with the hopes people would understand their own nature. The goat bears the symbol of the pentagram, with a point at the top and a symbol of light. His two hands form the symbol of Hermeticism, one up, one down. The name that points up to the white moon is Solve, and the one that points to the black moon is Coagula. This sign expresses the harmony of being, mercy, and justice. It also signifies the process of evolution. Coagula means the process of coagulation, is all that is stuck and touched inside, while solve means to dissolve, resolve, lose, release. Hence, one points down towards the animalistic being stuck without observing the shadow, while the other points upwards towards illumination. Levi then was trying to show us one cannot be illuminated without looking at the shadow of self. Why did he use the terms associated with mercy and justice, solve coagula? Because they are both part of a perfect unison. Psychologically speaking, it means to show mercy to your dark side, shadow, and justice was to remind you of the peace or illumination to come when you choose to resolve, heal your so-called dark side. His arms, one male and one female, to represent the androgynous state of the spirit and to represent all the attributes we have had to unite with our inner animal. The flame of intelligence bright between his horns is the magical light of universal balance. It is to represent the image of the soul raised above as flame. Although it was tied to matter, now it shines above it. The head of the so-called ugly beast expresses the horror of the sinner who has to accept his own punishment. It highlights our weaknesses, the low-frequency aspects of human nature, but it has nothing to do with the demonic because human beings are not demonic. It also focuses on self-responsibility and it encourages us to look in for the lessons. It is important to point out that when one studies esoteric tarot, the card of the devil holds the symbol of Baphomet. Now the card is a very powerful symbol and it does not mean something bad. But if you look at the image, the symbol of the beast is covered with eyes all over. And what this represents is a powerful entity who is capable of looking at himself clearly, all his light and all his darkness. That's why coming across towards that card is a sign of major transformation. Another reason why it is a goat face is to showcase the fact that goats are very smart, resilient, stubborn creatures who don't just give in. It was later on the dogma chose to use the symbol of a lamb or sheep because they are followers. So it is interesting the connotations when we actually study esoteric teachings or sacred history. Elias Levi purposely made the face to look so scary as to represent the horror most people feel when looking in and facing their own secrets and desires, for we have been conditioned to look away instead of straight at them. Yet, in order to transcend and ascend, we need to first dive and descend beneath the false layers we have created inside. Levi explained in his book that it is not God who punishes us because it is pure energy, and again, energy does not recognize good or bad, it's only the conduit that does so. So it is ourselves who are trying to escape our own horrors, but we do so through dissonance, where the mind and the heart are not in alignment, and so we say one thing but we behave differently, or we say one thing but we desire another thing, rather than owning up and understanding that there is nothing wrong with it. It is the motivation of the heart. Getting back to Baphomet, the stuff between his legs is nothing more than the symbol of fertility or life represented by the caduceus of Hermes, which symbolizes eternal life through the activation of all chakras, from the base of the spine to the head where the pineal gland lies. It's the use of feminine and masculine serpentine energy, called as such because of the way it moves towards the astral light. His body, covered with the scales, represents water. The semicircle above is the atmosphere. The feathers represent connectivity and the ability to rise or to elevate oneself. Humanity is represented by the two breasts and the androgynous arms of the Sphinx of the occult sciences. We have him sitting in the Buddha position, representing introspection, and the goat legs represent the lowest parts of man's nature. He's sitting on a cube on top of the planet to represent its culmination. It is clear then that the image of Levi is a mix of many things. What is also clear is that he never intended to represent a demon. He just used all the symbols to represent what an integrated human being is. To be an individual is to be human and divine in harmony, to accept our light and our darkness, that we are the sinner and the saint. And as long as the motivation is pure, that's what matters, and that's something that has been a resounding lesson with all the fathers of philosophies, such as Nietzsche or Carl Jung, Plato, Socrates. They all try to teach us the same thing. Gurdjieff, look at the heart's motivation. It is that which will decide what is good for you and what is not, because what might be good for you might be bad for somebody else, and what might be bad for you might be good for somebody else, for there is no one path for all, but various different paths, because divinity itself is immense and it expresses itself in so many different ways. So if we put our preconceptions aside, Levi's image represents what a human being is, with his light and darkness, and what he has to do to integrate. He never intended for people to use it as a symbol for anything satanic, barbaric, or evil. He simply wanted to show us what we need to do to ascend and transcend our lowest parts and to evolve. He showed us the alchemical process, which is the use of opposing forces to create astral light. The real basis of magic and illumination does not lie in fighting with self or with our world, but to use its forces to unite and enlighten. Again, if others get caught in the dark aspects of this representation and utilize the energy to focus on what is negative, it is not the symbol that does it, but the person projecting his or her own nature, his or her own need to hurt others or to run away from self. The Sabbatic goat or Baphomet was created to symbolize the path to astral light. That's it. I hope this recording has helped you better understand the symbology behind Elias Levi's Baphomet, and hopefully it will help you better understand the process of working with the shadow within. The true student will read between the lines and gain wisdom. If the light is with you, it will manifest.